Yeah, the Grizzlies are down Ja Morant. The Grizzlies are down Steven Adams. The Grizzlies are down Brandon Clark. We talk a lot about Tyus Jones. We talk a lot about Desmond Bain. We've talked a lot about Dylan Brooks, but make no mistake about it. Make no mistake about it. The one guy who is the most important Grizzlies player right now is Jaren Jackson Jr. We're going to talk about that right here, right now, coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Want to thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies, not only just wherever you are right now, but make sure you continue to tune in everywhere, because that's where we are. We're everywhere. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen or watch podcasts, you can find Locked On Grizzlies. So we appreciate you all for tuning in very much so today. And just remember that today's episode is brought to you by the one and only Ultimate GM. Look, I know some of you ever dreamed of becoming an NBA GM and you say, oh, the Grizzlies should make this trade and that trade. What, you think you can manage a basketball franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just go visit ultimatebasketballgm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners here on Locked On Grizzlies get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game. That's all caps. Use Locked On as your promo code and you get a 100% free boost. The Grizzlies could use a boost right now, and they could use that boost from the best player who is active right now, and that is Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't think this is up for debate anymore. I know last season we had talks on here, Unlocked On Grizzlies. As a matter of fact, not even last season, in the offseason, there was the Desmond Bain or Jaren Jackson Jr. conversation. Which guy is number two? You know, Ja Morant is your one. Is Dez your two? Is Jaren your two? And quite frankly, you can't go wrong with either guy. You know, I've been on here talking about how important Desmond Bain is to the Grizzlies as much or more than anyone. But I've come to the realization of how this thing works. And it's simple. Jaren Jackson Jr. changes this defense. We saw it with our own eyes. You remember when we were talking about it at the beginning of the season, how bad the defense was struggling, and it was like the snap of a finger. In the blink of an eye, quicker than a camera's flash, Jaren Jackson Jr. changed all of that. Now the Grizzlies are the top-rated defense in the NBA, and you know before he came back, this was a middle-of-the-pack defense, and I mean he is a game changer. He's the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year, and he kind of magnified what Dylan Brooks is doing. You know, Dylan Brooks was playing great defense all season long, but now the fact that you have Dylan Brooks kind of on guarding the wing defenders. Guarding the wing scorers, and Jaren Jackson Jr. behind him, it kind of makes for a perfect combo there. But the defense is one thing. This is where Jaren steps out. He's the premier two-way player on this Grizzlies team. As great as Dez is offensively, can make that argument. And you don't even have to make the argument. I'll just say it. Jaren is as good on the defensive end for this Grizzlies team. But the difference is when you watch Jaren Jackson Jr. on offense, and this is where the conversation goes here. When you watch Jaren Jackson Jr. on offense, he can be a force. He can be dominant, but you don't see it enough. We don't see it enough. And I've kind of got some answers for you guys. Why haven't we seen it enough? I've been asked time and time again, from people, the Grizzlies aren't getting Jaren Jackson Jr. the ball. Why isn't he getting the ball? We've talked about this a lot. There were some certain games in the past that showcased it. You remember the Lakers game? Remember the Lakers game recently? Jaren Jackson Jr. was dominating that first half. I believe he finished that first half with like 16, 18 points. They couldn't stop him. Anthony Davis was in and out of the lineup. But even when Anthony Davis was in the game, the Grizzlies did a great job forcing mismatches. And Jaren Jackson Jr., again, we talked about it early in the season. One of the best things that's come, from his development on the offensive end is he is punishing mismatches now. He's not playing with his food. It's not, oh, I got a 6'4" guard on me, but I'm still going to shoot the three. No, that's old. He sees a 6'3" guard on him. He's taking you to the post, and you better foul him or it's going up. So with that being said, he was dominating that Lakers game. Second half, didn't get as many mismatches. Matched up against Anthony Davis, and I've said, as skilled as Jaren Jackson Jr. is offensively, the polish is not there right now to dominate matchups against, guys with replica size. If he's going against an Anthony Davis, if he's going against, those type of defenders, a Joel Embiid or anyone of that ilk, he's not ready to dominate those matches yet. But guess what? That doesn't mean he's not ready to dominate an NBA game on the offensive end. Let me explain. You think of the best scorers in the NBA. The NBA is much different than it used to be. The game now is centered pretty much around creating mismatches and dominating those mismatches. The reason that is the case is because more teams are switching defensively in the NBA than we've ever seen. You remember the NBA used to be a little hedge and recover, type defense. Then they went into this drop defense became the new thing when teams start shooting more three-pointers and say, okay, the drop defense where, your big man drops back and forces, the team. It takes away the three and takes away, the layups, forces you into taking the mid-range shots. But then you had players like KD, DeMar DeRozan and Chris Paul, guys who just would, obliterate drop coverage. So then it switching. Golden State, I think, one of the teams that really popularized it as they went on their runs over the years. Thing about switching is you're basically saying, hey, we'll take these matchups. We'll take our 6'4" guard against your 6'9", 6'10" big. And it works a lot of time in today's NBA because big men aren't as skilled as scoring around the basket as they used to be. We see a lot of rim running bigs now. Just a bunch of guys catching alley-oops. These guys don't have post fadeaways anymore, post hooks, none of that stuff. But getting back to Jaren Jackson Jr. and how it correlates is look at the best scorers in the league. Look at Luka. Look at LeBron. Look at, James Harden when he was in his prime recently as a scoring champion. All those guys are masters at manipulating the matchup that they want. You think going into a game, the Clippers aren't going to, match up LeBron James with a Kawhi Leonard or Paul George type of guy. But LeBron, he's going to manipulate it into whatever matchup he wants. And be that Russell Westbrook, he's going to he's going to set a couple screens until he gets Russell Westbrook on him. Go back to the NBA Finals, those Warriors-Cavs game. LeBron was manipulating mismatches to get Steph Curry on him when the Warriors literally had Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala all on the floor. Three guys who are, capable of holding their own. So with that being said, the Grizzlies have to do a better job of manipulating the mismatches for Jaren Jackson Jr. Teams are willingly letting you switch these guys onto him. And when you see a 6'4", 6'3" guy on Jaren Jackson Jr., it shouldn't be a doubt in anyone's mind who is taking the shot on that possession. And if not taking a shot, who is not creating the offense. Be that, when he gets that matchup, help comes, on the defensive end, and he makes the correct pass to the open guy, or he makes the pass to the guy who makes the pass, the hockey pass, they call it, to the guy who creates the shooting opportunity. So that's where the Grizzlies can take advantage of Jaren Jackson Jr.'s, offensive progression. That's where the Grizzlies can get the most out of Jaren Jackson Jr., and that's where the Grizzlies can become a more efficient half-court offense. That's been the conversation, right? Taylor Jenkins called it, I believe like a month ago, he called it the elephant in the room, the half-court offense. Jaren Jackson Jr. is the key. Talking to a couple Grizzlies players, I asked them, said, do you think Jaren Jackson Jr. knows how dominant he can be? Like, does he know? We know Media knows. Uh, Clearly his teammates know. But does he know? Desmond Bain said, no, not yet. He doesn't know it yet. Dylan Brooks said, look, I've been telling him that since the bubble. But he'll get there. He has to get some more dog in him, as Dylan Brooks said. And that's something, that goes back to when you talk about getting that dog in you. We do a lot of talking about, the Grizzlies aren't getting Jaren the ball. The Grizzlies aren't getting Jaren the ball. How about he just demand it? How about that? I think it's simple. You got a mismatch on you, and you're 6'11", you got this 6'4", 6'5" guard on you. Put both of your hands in the air and let the team know, I got the mismatch. Give me the dang ball and let me go score. I think that's what he should do. So we'll see, how he continues to progress into that role, because overall, I think it's a role that kind of determines the ceiling of Jaren Jackson Jr. Defensively, he's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year this year. He's shooting a career high on 2-point shots. He's shooting a respectable 33.8% from three-point range. You combine that with the potential of Jaren Jackson Jr. being able to take more advantage of, the mismatches, being able to isolate himself on the block, and of course the foul trouble and things like that. If he kind of, gets to playing over 30 minutes per game, I think that's kind of the barometer there for him. If he gets to that point, you're talking about a guy who has the potential of not only being an all-star as he did this season, but being a superstar at the NBA level. Well, the guy we're about to talk about isn't a superstar at the NBA level, not an all-star either, but he's a rising star in the Grizzlies rotation. That is David Roddy. David Roddy's doing some great things right now, but how can he build on this? Where does he go from here, and how does it impact the Grizzlies rotation? We're going to talk about that in a second. But before we talk about that, I got to reach out to my GMs here. We're talking about David Roddy. He was a first-round pick for the Grizzlies. And I got to talk to you about Ultimate Basketball GM, because would you have made the same move if you were the Grizzlies GM? I don't think so. I don't remember seeing a lot of you guys talk about David Roddy going up into the draft. But listen, if you've ever dreamed of becoming an NBA GM and managing your own basketball franchise, Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is the thing for you. It's definitely the game for me. I love it. And And let me tell you some of the things you can do. When you're on Ultimate Pro Basketball GM, you manage every strategic aspect of your team. You play through the season and you lead your team to glory. If you make a good team, that is. If you make a bad team, then you can tank like the 76ers of old or something like that. But with all that being said, you have the responsibility of hiring the right coaches, the assistants, the training players. You can trade them. You can make draft picks. And you can navigate your way through free agency and the draft. You get to experience all the ups and downs of an NBA season. So here's the thing. This is all you have to do. Just go download the game and visit probasketballgm.com. Remember, you can go download it, or you can just visit probasketballgm.com. And look, Locked On Grizzlies listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when you use the promo code Locked On in the game store. So if you go download probasketballgm.com, use the promo code Locked On, all caps, LOCKEDON in all caps, you'll get 100% free boost to their franchise when using that promo code. A big boost to the Grizzlies franchise has been David Roddy. We'll talk about him in a second, coming up after the break. David Roddy has been kind of a godsend for this Grizzlies team, right at the right time, right? They've struggled with depth. They've struggled, getting, production from wings off the bench. Remember, coming into the season, it was almost a foregone conclusion. Like, yeah, you got Dylan in the starting lineup. Then you got, Xavier Williams was supposed to be the guy who was stepping into this new role. And it just hasn't happened. And Xavier Williams, be great to see him, kind of getting back to where he was going into the end of last season. But right now, he is out. He's firmly out of the rotation, and it doesn't look like he'll be back in at any point this season. But enter David Roddy. And I admire this guy's mental toughness a lot, because how many of you, I sincerely want to know, how many of you could deal with starting for the Memphis Grizzlies, then say, okay, yeah, now go down, we're sending you down to the G League, and you go start for the G League team. Then you come back up to the Grizzlies, and you're just sitting on the bench, clapping for your teammates, high fives. Then you play big minutes. Then you go back to the bench. Then you sit down again. Then you come back up. That's David Roddy. That's what he has experienced this season. And it's got to be mentally challenging. But I was talking to Xavier Tillman. Xavier Tillman Sr. was basically saying, look, man, I'm a third-year guy. Because Xavier Tillman is the one player who's kind of went through some similarities this season. He said, I'm a third-year guy. Like, I should be able to handle this. I know how the NBA works at this point. But for him, a rookie, to be told, yeah, you're going to play X amount of minutes this night. You're not going to play this night. There was even a point earlier this season where the Grizzlies, they have their travel squad when they go on the road. David Roddy was supposed to be a part of that travel squad. And at the last minute, the very last minute, they told him he couldn't go. Actually, we want you to go down to the G League instead of going on this road trip. By all accounts, Taylor Jenkins said he handled it well. He's a pro already, and you see it through his calm demeanor on the basketball floor. But the thing is, how is this going to translate? And that is the performance. It's 2 performances against the Mavs. You want to look at it from the bright perspective. David Roddy is figuring some things out. You want to be a realist here, like I try to do on this show all the time. The Mavs wing defense sucks. It's not good. So with that being said, how can he stack upon those performances against the Mavericks, against better teams who have better wing defenders, against better teams who have better rim protectors? And that is the question at this point. Remember, David Roddy's 2 highest scoring games of the entire season are the last 2 games, and both those games were against the Dallas Mavericks. The Miami Heat have better rim protection. A guy like Bam Adebayo. Not sure how many minutes Adebayo and Roddy will overlap, but they also have a few feisty defenders over there with the Heat as well. So I'm looking at that. That's what I want to see. How does David Roddy's progression continue as he goes against different defenses? Because one thing that we've noticed is there is a method to his success now. I think as a rookie, you're so caught in figuring it out a lot of times. Your game is different. I remember Zaire last season saying pretty much his entire life he's played on the ball. Then he gets to the Grizzlies, he basically becomes a spot-up shooter, and he has to, score in transition from time to time. That's kind of who he became at the NBA level. David Roddy, I always say this, but I really challenge all of you. Go look at his college YouTube highlights. You will be like, man, he doesn't play like that with us. He doesn't play like that with the Grizzlies. But that's because the Grizzlies don't use him that way. He's playing the 3 a lot here. He gets his minutes at the 4, and then he's 4 and 5, basically, in college. So he's had to adjust. And now there's a method, knock down some shots, take some guys off the dribble, and run the floor like a deer. And he's doing that right now. So that's David Roddy. A lot of people want to say, yeah, his spot in the rotation is firm now. Yes, it is. But when Ja gets back, it's going to be one less spot if Ja gets back. We've talked about that a lot. I don't have to prolong that part of it. But there may be one less rotation spot. And I'm sure, David Roddy, the way he's played, if he continues to play this well, we're not talking about David Roddy leaving the rotation. We're talking about how these minutes are going to be distributed between guys like Roddy, John Conchar, and Luke Canard. As me and Joe Mullinax talked about on yesterday's show, Luke Canard is gaining minutes. He's gaining minutes, but John Conchar is still ahead of him in the rotation. John Conchar is still ahead of him in the rotation. Luke Canard's role is growing, and I think I was asked in Locked On Grizzlies comments about Luke Canard, like if he was playing, more minutes, if he was taking more shots, how many points do I think he could average? Make no mistake about it. I think that guy could average 18 to 20, 18 points a game in a starting role. If he's starting in Desmond Bane's spot, he can give you 18 points a game for sure. I think so. I think he's a really good player. I think it's just, it's a matter of fit type things, which is, the Grizzlies, as we've seen so far, they can seemingly only put Desmond Bane and Canard on the floor together. Desmond Bane plays at the point guard. So it hasn't been seen a lot yet where a point guard has the ball and you have, Desmond Bane on one side, Luke Canard on one side, and basically say, hey, which side you're going to sag off, teams? Pick your poison. We haven't seen that enough yet, and that's what I want to see. But the thing about that, you pick your poison with that, the opposing team's going to go back on the other end on offense, and they're going to say, who do we want to score on? Because neither of them, are classified as great defenders. Both solid. Desmond Bane's solid. I like the way, he competes on that end, and Luke Canard also competes on the defensive end. So both solid guys, but David Roddy's progression directly impacts John Conchar and Luke Canard's minutes. That's another thing to watch as we get, in this next stretch of games, because the playoffs will come, the rotation will get smaller, and one of those guys is going to get the short end of the stick. I've seen some of you saying David Roddy should be in front of John Conchar, and the way he's playing right now, just the offensive boost he gives you, the defensive versatility. I think there's a strong statement, that can be made that's true. But we have to see it over a course of period of time. Okay, you did it against the Mavs. It's great to see David Roddy finally have those breakout performances, but the Mavs aren't necessarily known for wing defense. They're not known for rim protection. There are better opponents ahead. So you got to see it against those teams, because playoffs, it's gonna be some good defense. Teams compete on that end in the playoffs. But speaking of competing, the Grizzlies have a big game coming up on the road against the Miami Heat. We're going to talk about that game here in a second. But before we talk about that game, we got to talk about FanDuel, because guess what? FanDuel is where you go if you want to place any bets on that game. And I always tell you guys, you talk about how to use FanDuel and what's the best method, what's the best way to use it. I'm an advocate for the same game parlays. See, look, with the same game parlays, it's simple. You go to the Grizzlies players and you say, hey, I project this player to score this many points, that player to score this many points, this guy to get this many rebounds. I think this is a good game to say, hey, Jaren Jackson Jr. going against some small guys. Put a little risk on it. Put him at 15 or more points. Put him at 3 or more blocks. Jimmy Butler, great scorer, but you got Dylan Brooks on the other end. How many points do you put him at? But anyways, you can make all of those into a same game parlay, and you can make some nice money off that if you play your cards right. Think about it is, don't miss the chance for the no sweat first bet too. If you're new to FanDuel at the same time, your no sweat first bet can be up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com and go to /lockedon. FanDuel.com/lockedon is where you can take advantage of those bonus bets. But don't forget, with FanDuel, it's not only the same game parlays. You can do things like the spread, the money line, the total. All of the above are factored into FanDuel, and it is the premier sports betting place out there and it's the official sports betting partner right now of the NBA as well. The Grizzlies, as you're talking about FanDuel here in this upcoming game, they're not the favorites, just in case you know. But we'll talk about that game coming up here in a second after the break. The Grizzlies are back on the road against the Miami Heat. The Heat are 23-13 at home. The Grizzlies, as I've said in the past, struggled on the road. They, before that Mavs game, had lost 11 of 12 on the road, but you got the big win against the Mavericks. And now there's a chance to kind of right some wrongs here, right? There's a chance to get this thing back in the right direction. And when I say back in the right direction, I'm not, talking about, continuing to, they've won 3 games in a row. Yes, but I'm talking about against a team like the Miami Heat. When was the last time the Grizzlies beat a team like this on the road? Because this is what you're going to be going against in the playoffs. You beat the Mavs on the road. No Kyrie. No Luka. Before that, the only road win was the Houston Rockets over that 12-game stretch. And that one explains itself, right? See, Houston Rockets. They're on tankathon right now trying to see if they can get the number 1 pick. It's level. So it's a whole different level right here. This is a Heat team. They're desperate right now. You don't want to play an Eric Spoelstra coached team when it's desperate. The Heat are the 7th seed in the East, and they don't want to be the 7th seed. They're trying to lock that top 6 spot up. You're a 7th seed. You're in the play-in. And Jimmy Butler has been playing with his hair on fire lately. I think Jimmy Butler and his recent play is something to watch. But guess what? Grizzlies got a guy over there, and his name is Dillon Brooks. That's my number 1 matchup in this game. Jimmy Butler against Dillon Brooks. And usually, when I talk about my number 1 matchups for games, it's usually Dillon Brooks versus the guy he's guarding. I know some of you have caught on to that, but guess what? That's the name of the NBA now. That's the name of the NBA. The NBA is dominated by wings now. You got these 2s, 3s, and these talented 4s who can put the ball on the floor and do all these things. That is the name of the game. We call it positionless basketball, right? Jimmy Butler has put this team on his back, as of late. They just beat the Jazz 119-115. In that game, Jimmy Butler, 24 points, 8 rebounds. And then before that, they lost in overtime to the Orlando Magic, an overtime game where Jimmy Butler, he got them in overtime and had 38 points on 14 of 25 shooting in that game. And if you go back even a step before that, played the Cleveland Cavaliers and they beat the Cavs. Jimmy Butler, 33 points. But you notice what I just said. Over that 3-game stretch, all you heard me say was Jimmy Butler. You didn't hear me say Tyler Hero. You didn't hear me say Bam Adebayo. You didn't hear me say Gabe Vincent, Kevin Love, Caleb Martin, Max Strus, Victor Oladipo. You didn't hear me say any of those names. It's because those guys got to step up. The Cavs game, Tyler Hero had 25 points. The last 2 games, Jimmy Butler is the only Miami Heat player to top 20 points. He's the only one. That there is it tells me all I need to know. It's why the Heat right now are ranked 30th in the NBA in points per game. But you know where the Heat get the job done? They're a feisty defense. They're Eric Spoelstra coach defense. They give you a bunch of different looks. They have this matchup type of zone matchup zone with man principles that they play, and it's some nasty stuff. And then they can get after you. You got Bam Adebayo on the back end, one of the best defenders in the game. You got Gabe Vincent, feisty point guard, a guy who's probably going to get matched up against Tyus Jones. That's going to be a fun matchup to watch as well. Tyler Hero, Desmond Bane. Tyler Hero has the contract that Desmond Bane is probably going to get plus more. Desmond Bane's probably going to top that deal and whatnot. But Tyler Hero has that money. So you play against a guy like that. NBA players know. They know. They're like, hey, let me go bust this guy up real quick and show them, hey, you see how much he's making? I deserve more. That's a thing. So at the end of the day, this game here, it's not a Western Conference game. No, but it's still a game where the Grizzlies, you got the San Antonio Spurs next, you got the Warriors at home, You got the Mavs at home. You got the Rockets at home twice after that. You see where I'm going? The Grizzlies have won 3 games in a row. This game against the Heat, underdogs. If you take away that game against the Heat, the Spurs should be a win. Warriors, great team, but Grizzlies at home, best home record in the NBA right now. Then you get the Mavs at home. Grizzlies, best home record in the NBA right now. Then you get the Rockets at home for 2. You don't win both of those, it's a letdown. So with all that being said, all signs point to the Grizzlies being in a position where they can go on a streak here. They can go on a run. And it all starts right here, right now, with this Miami Heat game. This is a momentum booster. This is the one team that you're going to play. And not only are they desperate, but they're good at home. Amid all their struggles, this is not a great rebounding team. They are very good at home. One of the things I really want to see is this should be a Jaren Jackson Jr. game. Miami Heat, they're feisty. They're not going to just let him, get just dominate inside. But this should be a Jaren Jackson Jr. game. This game has the makings to be one of his type of games where he can really impose his will. The Heat do play 2 bigs at the beginning of the game. They start the game, Kevin Love, Bam Adebayo, but after that, they're going to go small for big stretches. That means Xavier Tillman is going to have to crash the boards. That means Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to have to dominate his matchup, as we said in the first segment. And if those things happen, the Grizzlies have a chance of pulling this out on the road against a really good Miami Heat team. And if those things don't happen, at least you're going back home. You know what I mean? At least you get San Antonio in a game where we'll get a Ja Morant update as well. So stay tuned for that. But at least you go play the Spurs, and then you get back home. So that's something to look forward to. But this game against the Miami Heat, I think it's a big one. I think not in the natural realm of things, but it's a game where the Grizzlies, you're playing a really good team at home. And at the end of the day, there's going to be some scoreboard watching going on, right? We did the scoreboard watching. The Grizzlies are back at the 2 seed since the Sacramento Kings lost against the Bucks recently. And the Kings, they host the Bulls. They're on the road against the Chicago Bulls. Don't sleep on that Chicago team. The Chicago Bulls won their last 2 games. Remember, they blew out the Nuggets, and they beat the Rockets on the road as well. So they won their last 2 games. Don't sleep on that Chicago Bulls team. But it'll be good either way it goes for the Grizzlies to take care of their own business. Then you don't have to do the scoreboard watching thing over there. So we'll talk about, the Miami Heat game tomorrow, and we'll discuss what, the Grizzlies, where the Grizzlies go from here in terms of the Western Conference standings and much more. I believe my partner Joe Mullinax will have you covered on that episode by himself. I won't be tuning in with him. So stay tuned for that as well. But before you get out of here, make sure that you go make your second listen game to game. It's every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that Locked On can deliver. Follow Locked On Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. I want to appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies, guys. Y'all know we appreciate it. Make sure you continue to like, subscribe, comment, rate, review, all of those great things. We're looking at everything. We appreciate everything, but appreciate you the most. From this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, your host, Damichael Cole, and we'll see you next time on the one and only Locked On Grizzlies.